Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. It's been an interesting bit of research the last week or so, investigating channeling. I got a new book in the mail. Tuning in. A journalist and 6 trance channelers and messages from the other side. So if you've been watching my videos, you're aware that I've researched the occult organizations, Freemasons, Rosicrucian, groups like the Zionist, the Vatican, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, witchcraft organizations, Bohemian Grove, Bilderbergers, Council of Foreign Relations, Skull and Bones, Presidents, the Illuminati, Club of Rome, and so much more. Remote viewing, psychic research, conspiracy theories, UFO, aliens. Just beware of familiar spirits. So what are these spirits? Tuning in. So I decided to spend a little time and make some videos on this channeling to try to investigate this and see what I think. So far, I think, if you've been watching my videos like I just said, it seems clear, even since the 1920s when they had congressional hearings, that the communists, and who are the communists? What are the communists? It appears it's a derivative of the Zionist Jewish people who want a world utopia. The Bolshevik Jews who went into Russia, abducted the Tsar and his family, murdered them all out in some farmhouse, proceeded to take over that whole country, as large as the United States or larger, kill 100 million Christians and other good people over 10 or 15 years, expand communism around the world. Commune. That's like raising people, or I should say enslaving people like they're cattle. It's just what I'm learning. So they're trying to destroy Christianity. Obviously, the Muslim, the Arabs, Islam, they were trying to destroy that also. They've been enemies for years in the Middle East. And so they're promoting this new one world order, one world religion, one world currency, one world control, and monitoring the rest of us 24/7. How far will it go? Hunger Games, Divergent, the movies, a lot of other crazy movies out there, TV programs like Gotham and Lucifer. We had Seinfeld and 2.5 Men preaching this new way of living. Like Seinfeld, every other show was sleeping with a different woman. 2.5 Men, Charlie sometimes slept with several women in the show. And then, of course, Modern Family and all the other stuff normalizing the gay agenda. Transgenderism, pansexuality, sex with anybody, everything. And I've been going over the Kabbalah, the ancient, or I should say historic Jewish culture, even in 1666, Sabbatai Zivi, I've made videos on this, declared himself the Messiah. But strangely enough, his set of commandments were opposite of the 10 Commandments. Anti-10 Commandments, anti-God, anti-Christian, anti-family values and decency and all that stuff. So they're trying to destroy Christianity. People can't deny that. Freemasons were, and all the Theophist Society, Helene Blavatsky, they always say negative things about the Christians. In the old religion, they don't even single out Christianity. It's all history. It didn't work. But something new is going to work. Tuning in, channeling. So anyways, I've been continuing my pursuit to understand. I've been watching some Cryon videos. Fascinating material. I think, what's his name? Lee Carroll, channeling some entity called Cryon. Almost 20 years or more. And I've been taking my notes as usual. Got pages and pages of notes on watching these Cryon videos. Just to give you a little snapshot here. Humans like us, this is what he says, some of the things, appeared here on Earth 200,000 years ago. So this video is Cryon teaches about the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians are popular. Barbara Manisek and other channelers are channeling the Pleiadian aliens from the star system. They call it the Seven Sisters. The Pleiades. You can look it up. So the Pleiadian influence on our history. How we will follow in their footsteps. So they developed over 1 million years and evolved into these light beings. Just saying how it appears to me, what I've been learning. And apparently humans now are going to evolve into light beings. The physics will change. The molecular construction of a whole reality. Gravity. Quantum physics. You'll be able to manifest things right out of thin air. Transport yourself from here to there. So anyways, Cryon says, who seeded us? When we get to the some new inventions, he says, are coming that'll change everything. The ability to change and create quantum energy. We will hear and see the other beings through the veil. Rewrite spiritual systems. Honor God, but in a different way. Revealing new revelations about the snake in the garden. The snake in the Garden of Eden. So I guess we're going to find out he wasn't such a bad snake after all. So they teach. We'll see. The talking snake are representative of a creative energy. The reality of light and dark was given to us in an allegory. So don't believe what the Bible says. It's all an allegory. All a metaphor. All an illusion. Just an example. So it teaches. Remember, I keep saying, I'm not preaching this stuff as truth. I'm studying and sharing what I perceive they're saying. I have a God-given brain, I can use it. So the people who watch my videos. So that's our history. Those who came and changed our reality did so after their change over 1 million years ago. So if you listen to Barbara Manisek, or you go back and watch my videos I made on Barbara Manisek's books, they say they're here to fix some problems. That they made mistakes when they altered Earth's inhabitants thousands of years ago. A couple other books I'll mention before I start this book review. This book review is going to be part 5, a continuation of Edgar Cayce's Story of Jesus. So before I start getting more into these other channelers, I want to exhaust Edgar Cayce's discussion about Jesus and his teachings or trance readings or philosophy. What is the truth? I suppose with enough study we'll learn something. Here's one of his other books, Edgar Cayce, an Encyclopedia of Healing. So for 25,000 readings, the first 20 years of his life, accidentally they discovered when he went into a trance he could contact the other world, across the veil. Apparently the Akashic records, some kind of holo records that documents everything about every one of us and what we do. So for the first half of his life he was doing this, and he was astonishing doctors and people everywhere. He could come up with solutions to people's ailments that wasn't readily known or stumped some doctors. Then somebody discovered if they asked him questions about somebody's past life, he could produce answers to that apparently were somewhat verified, seemed very true. Were they? Got this book in the mail. Remember this channeling, talking to angels or watchers or masters. Maybe they're talking to demons, archons, Pleiadians, pixies, elves, and all kinds of other beings on the other side of the veil. So apparently when you talk about another dimension, another paradigm, where everything is different, another plane, they have different words for it. But anyways, people get information, and they call them prophets in early Judaism, the Old Testament pseudo-pictograph. So I'm going to go over more of this stuff with Jewish mysticism. I'm a little determined to figure this stuff out. Put a lot of time into this. So anyways, I'm up to page 237. Only 4 pages left on the chapter, The Early Years and Ministry of Jesus Christ. And I found it fascinating. Some very revealing pieces of information. So what I'll do is I'll just start reading. And see what you think. When I get into this other material from these other channelers, from this chart I made, I'm not finished making the chart. Got a few more holes to fill in. I like to fill it in completely. That was my chart on something else. I had it upside down. So what I'll do is after I watched the different channelers like Lee Carroll or Esther Hicks, Natalie Glasson, Nancy Leader, Zeta Talk, Giorgio's Hanton, that would be the Phoenix journals I've been going over, Christine Hayden, Daryl Anka, Helen Schumann, Madam Helena Blavatsky. I've been going over The Secret Doctrine and some of her material. Remember, she's the one who was publishing the Lucifer magazine and created the Lucifer Publishing Company, which later became the Lucas Publishing Company, for obvious reasons. Lucifer is just a little bit too much for people. Too obvious. Henry Olscott, another Theophist. Aleister Crowley, known as the evilest man alive. He was talking to those two beings, Aluos and Haas, I think. Beings from the other side, they look like gray aliens. Nostradamus, we'll talk about that. We're doing Edgar Cayce, Cecil Cook, J.Z. Knight, Dan Atkins, Brahma Kumarius, channeling Raja and doing yoga meditation. Sheila Gillette, Ernest Norman, I've been going over those books. William Sadler, Barbara Marcinek, the Palladian series of books. And Nikolai Tesla got a lot of his material through visions and dreams that he would tell people about on stage. And they would jump up on stage and try to shut him up. I found out, that's how I got into this whole thing. I was collecting material on historic scientists because I felt the universities and the system were keeping something from the rest of us. Man alive, was I right. William Alber, Veronica, channeling Elohim in the Council. That ought to be interesting. Bernard Perona, Sacred Geometry, Flower of Life, the Merkaba and Meditation. And notice the Merkaba pops up in these different videos I watch on channeling. As in the Merkaba was in the Jewish mysticism book. We'll be looking at that more. Obviously, because according to Lee Carroll, there's an invention coming, a Merkaba, I guess, that allows all of us to see beyond the veil, see other people in different ways. And as of course, there's a couple websites that you can either get channeled information for yourself or become a channeler. Not that I'm suggesting you do it. But you can look at the websites www.ask-angels.com and www.angelic-guides.com. So as you can see, I'm taking this line of research quite serious. So what I wanted to do is another video. I average about 2 hours. But I wanted to just read some of these readings that Edgar Cayce gave to people involving Jesus' ministry, the early years. Remember, Jesus was crucified apparently when he was 33 and began his ministry at the age of 30, just 3 years. So it's fascinating to read this, but some of these people talk about his earlier years when he was young. Alright, so I'm going to start right here. With they have questions and answers, and I'm not reading everything. I highly suggest if you find this as fascinating as I do, you go buy the book. I think it's just I want to examine some of this paragraph by paragraph. Did Jesus study under Greek philosophers? So a lot of people probably are not aware, but apparently Jesus went through quite an extensive education. You learn a little bit of some sidebars about Palestine back then, Jerusalem, when the Romans had occupied it, and the local Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, and the Jews and their religions, and the Essenes and all that. So it's just kind of interesting to read this stuff and pay attention to each paragraph and the material. So did Jesus study under the Greek philosophers? And was it through educational contacts that the Greeks later came to him to beg him to come to their country when the Jews cast him out? So apparently he was having trouble in Palestine with the Jewish people because of what he was preaching. It was going against the grain of the current Jewish law. Edgar Cayce says, "We do not find such. Jesus, as Jesus, never appealed to the worldly wise." Question: why does not the Bible tell of Jesus' education? Or are there manuscripts now on earth that will give these missing details? There are some that have been forged manuscripts. All those that existed were destroyed. That is, the originals with the activities in Alexandria. So we know that the Pope, the Vatican, the Catholic Church, back then wanted to, and I guess accomplished, burning the Library of Alexandria, which had untold amounts of historical manuscripts and other material there that was ancient materials. But it all went up in flames. Why? And I'm also under the understanding when the conquistadors, Ponce de Leon, those types came to America, Mexico, and they would go to the villages and abduct the Shama, the religious person, and confiscate the relics if that they didn't destroy. And they were seeking the information from these shamanic ministers or the holy men for these tribes all over the world. And then they would destroy everything and kill the Shama and start killing the people and taking all their gold. Very vicious thing in history. Are there any written records that have not been found of his teachings? More written records, rather, of those of his close associates. So they have old documents by his close associates, so they got secondhand word of what happened. And those records that are not yet to be found regarding the preparation of the man, of the Christ, and those records of the tomb. So we know that the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and they're over there scurrying like rats all over the Middle East right now. If you're not aware of this, archaeological digs are happening, looking for more evidence or more relics, more secrets. Or those yet to be uncovered in the pyramid. Question: when will this chance be given for these to be uncovered? When will this chance? Can't read this right. So when will these things be discovered? When there has been sufficient of the reckoning through which the world is passing at the present. Moving on, another question. Before going further upon the ministry of Jesus, we should like to get something straightened out. It has been given that Jesus lived and died a man. Also, it has been given that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Please explain these things to us. How may we regard the truth of Jesus in relation to the Jewish and Christian religion, and to all the other religions of the world? Well, that's a loaded question. What's the truth about the religions all over the world? Answer: in that man, Jesus, manifested in the world the oneness of his will with the Father, he becomes, from man's viewpoint, the only, the first begotten of the Father. Thus he is the example of the world, whether Jew or Gentile, or any other religious force. Now remember, the Jews, not all Jews, but the Jewish throughout history, all Jews, I guess, consider non-Jews Gentiles. And a lot of Jews, I guess the ones who look upon us as lowly creatures, even creatures with no souls or souls of demons, call us goy and goyim, which means cattle. So there is this animosity that exists. There's no question about that. It would be a fool for Christian people to try to believe that that doesn't exist, or any other people of any religion, or people of no religion. There is a purpose, there is a goal for a new age and a new world order. The question is, will it be good for us or bad for us? You can't get more plain spoken than that. Is it going to be good for us or bad for us? So that's why I do this research to a certain extent. Years ago, I realized something was happening, and it all appeared to be planned, like 9/11, World War I, World War II. I've learned so much more since then. Congressional hearings in the 1920s with the communists. that they said they were going to infiltrate every aspect of our society and change it. So is this channeled information the new religion? And if it is it going to be good for us or bad for us? And all the sweet things they say, like the words love is light, is it all a deception? You don't have to be a fool to just sit there and watch the videos and believe it. You have to think. The deception is going on. We've seen it. Watch some of my previous videos. I've been ranting about it for quite a while. Alright, moving on. Hast thou not found that the essence, the truth, and the real truth is one? Mercy, justice, peace, and harmony. For without Moses and his leader Joshua, that was bodily Jesus in another time in the earth, there is no Christ. Christ is not a man. Jesus was a man. Christ is the messenger. Jesus in all ages, Jesus in one. Christ in all ages, Jesus in one. Joshua in another. Melchizedek in another. These be those that led Judaism. So they're saying this spiritual entity that after Jesus grew to a certain point in his life, I'm thinking here, this Christ entered him and began expressing through him. And we're going over all these channeled materials. So it was some kind of spiritual being that possessed Jesus, that possessed Joshua, that possessed Melchizedek, and possessed all these other people who are channeling information. Helena Blavatsky, who created the Lucifer magazine and the Lucifer Publishing Company. I mean, is everybody that's being possessed all being possessed by benevolent entities? Or are some of them being possessed by malevolent energies, evil forces? Again, I think it's an important thing to think about. So I read these books and we go over it, and people can ponder it. Come up with your own conclusions. I come up with mine. Alright, so these be those that led Judaism. So apparently these same spiritual entities from some other plane, some other dimension, beyond the veil, something you can't see. They probably created the Buddhist, Hindu, all the religions all over the world. Now it makes sense a little bit. We're all spiritual beings in these biological bodies. These be they that came as the child of promise, as the children of promise. And the promise is in thee, as ye lead, as he given thee, feed my sheep. So right now we know they plan on a new age and a new world order. 9/11, they've been overthrowing all the countries in the Middle East, bombing all the properties, houses, villages, water plants, sewer plants, manufacturing, industrial buildings, to smithereens, every country almost in the Middle East. And they plan on a larger Israel, so I don't think that's what God would want. Jesus would not be of that kind of person. So who is doing it? And why? And what's the end game? What will come here to the United States and Europe? World War III? Will they be bombing everything, nuking us? And it says that in this channeled material. So it is something to ponder. And if we create our own reality, as a lot of this occult New Age stuff teaches, can we be programmed to think something that will manifest that programmed reality? Will they program us to destroy ourselves? Then, though he were the first of man, as Adam, so apparently this being was also as Adam, explained before, the first of the sons of God in spirit. So Adam was the first one. So apparently, they say that the entity that was Jesus was many other entities throughout history. Again, not that I'm preaching this is true. Just going over this. And when we listen to what I've said in this video, and we listen to what the other channeled information from the different beings, whether they actually be some being called Zeta Talk, or the Palladians, or Cryon, or Buddha, whoever gets channeled. This promises to be a long, interesting investigation. So Adam, like Adam and Eve, the first of the sons of God in spirit, in flesh. It became necessary that he fulfill all those associations, those connections that were to wipe away the experience of man, that which separates him from his maker. All right, got another paragraph down here. In this we find the true advocate with the Father, in that he, as man, manifested in the flesh the ability of the flesh to make fleshly desires one with the will of the Spirit. For God is Spirit, and they who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. Just as Jesus manifested in the flesh, he was able to partake of the divine because he made all laws susceptible to his mandate by his will being one with the Father. Since he took on all law, he became a law unto himself. Moving on here, page 196. The compliance even with an earthly or material law enables the person to be the law. In that example, Jesus, who lived as a man, who died as a man, became an example of all who would approach the throne of God. Question: what is the significance and meaning of the words Jesus and Christ, as they should be understood and applied? Jesus is the man, the activity, the mind, the relationship that he bore to others. Yea, he was mindful of friends. He was sociable. He was loving. He was kind. He was gentle. He grew faint. He grew weak. And yet gained that strength which he had promised in becoming the Christ, by fulfilling and overcoming the world. Ye are made strong in body, in mind, in soul, purpose by that power in Christ. The power then is in the Christ. The pattern is in Jesus. Question: so when Edgar Cayce was in a trance, he would not be aware of what he was saying, but the being or whatever possessed him could hear somebody sitting in a chair taking notes, the questions, and he would answer them. And according to the raw material that I went over, a lot of people who channel, they actually channel entities, maybe were once human, or maybe they were never human, just angelic beings or demonic beings, like Aleister Crowley. But apparently Ra said in that channeled material I went over that Edgar Cayce wasn't channeling any other beings. He was accessing the Akashic records, some kind of hall of records up in the ether, in the atmosphere maybe, that some kind of way they document everything, like I guess some kind of memory disk or something. Crystals, I don't know. It'll probably unfold as I continue to investigate more information about this stuff. Question again. You have already mentioned that after Jesus' baptism by John in the river Jordan, he went into the wilderness to meet that which had been his undoing in the beginning. I guess that would be Satan, the devil, Lucifer. Did he spend those 40 days alone, or did he have any disciples with him? Answer. When pointed out by John the Baptist as the one that should be greater and increased as he decreased. Andrew, who was first an adherent and a disciple of that teacher John, and remained close as an aid from the verse conviction until the appearance of Jesus. Then followed the new leader, so it was this Andrew, who followed the new leader, Jesus, into the wilderness and was close with him during the temptation, as is recorded by Matthew in the Bible. I've made the first 3 books of the Bible, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, I made videos. And I will be reading the 4th book of the Bible and making another video really soon. I just feel compelled to do that. Which is interesting because when I do more on the New Testament and go to the 4th book, the different apostles, and the 5th book and the 6th book, I have a lot more information to think upon as I read. More stuff that I've researched. So it just should make it more interesting. For me, anyways. So Jesus goes into the woods for 40 days and encounters Satan who tempts him. Temptation. With the return to the seashore, Andrew sought out the brother Peter, telling of those ideals as they were propounded by him who had pointed out and became the close disciple, then of the teacher and the master. Question. Was this the time that James and John, the sons of Zebedee, also became disciples? Not only the brothers, but those employed by the brothers joined in. For the business activities of Zebedee required that the purposes and aims be rather carried on through or by agents. Or to put in the parlance of the present, the entity was rather in the fishing business as a wholesaler than being in active service himself. So when some of these apostles joined Jesus, they or their father had businesses. As indicated or given, that he, as he passed by and saw James and John with their father Zebedee, mending their nets, rather were the brothers and the father supervising and reasoning with the employees as to their activities. These are just readings to people that Edgar Cayce said in previous lifetimes were these people. And this was some of the things they did. And they have numbers here, like that was person number 540. The other one was person number 2533. Alright. It is sometimes judged that most of the disciples were poor. But this was not true. For Zebedee and his sons, Matthew the publican, all who were closely associated with were rather well-to-do. Peter and Andrew, of course, were servants or laborers with the sons of Zebedee, but Zebedee was among the wealthy and among those closely associated with those in authority. John was the wealthiest of the disciples of the Christ. His estate would be counted in the present in American money as being near to $250,000. He was influential with those in Roman and Jewish power of that period. So it's just interesting to think about the people who were in that area doing business, the society back then. Apparently there were a lot of Romans in Palestine, Jerusalem, in that area. in the time of Jesus' birth and Jesus' ministries. And there were communications with Persia, like Iran, and Egypt, and India. So the world was a little more cosmopolitan than at least I thought. I don't know what other people think. The wedding at Cana. So apparently Jesus went to this wedding, and apparently they ran out of wine, so he turned water into wine. But let me read on and tell you the story. The first recorded miracle is at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, when the Master changed water into wine. Would you please give a complete word picture of the event with such details as whether names of people in wedding, food and drink, games and dances, etc.? So they certainly asked Edgar Cayce some interesting questions. What was it like back then to go to a wedding? Answer. That came about soon after the return of the Master from the Jordan and his dwelling by the sea. His conversation with Peter after Andrew had told Peter of the happenings at the Jordan. Then there was the wedding in Cana of Galilee. The girl was a relative of those close to the mother of Jesus. So he's going to the wedding because the girl was a relative of the mother of Jesus, Mary, who prepared the wedding feast, as was the custom of that period, and is yet among those of all the Jewish faith who adhered to the traditions as well as custom of those people chosen as the channel because of their purpose with God. I notice they got that word channel there. The girl to be wed was a daughter of the cousin of Mary, a daughter of a younger sister of Elizabeth, whose name was also Mary, and she was the one spoken of as the older other Mary, and not as some have supposed. So the younger sister of Elizabeth apparently was named Mary, as well as Jesus' mother. The custom required that there be a feast, which was composed of roasted lamb, with the herbs, the breads that had been prepared in the special ways, which were the custom and tradition of those who followed close to the faith of Moses' law. Remember, Moses went up to the mountain to get the 10 Commandments. Moses' custom and Moses' ordinances. So those were the laws of the land back then. The families of Mary were present as well as those of the groom. Apparently the groom was a Roman. The groom, in the name of Ronel, was among the sons of Zebedee, being an older brother of James and John, who later became a close friends and closer followers of Jesus. So maybe this groom wasn't the Roman soldier I was thinking. The Master returning with those who were hangers-ons. So when Jesus walked around and traveled around, he had people who followed him, hanger-ons. Naturally sought to speak with his mother. Learning of this happening, he too with the followers were bid to remain at the feast. Much wine was part of the custom. Who would have thunk that? They were drinking a bunch of wine at this wedding. The day was what ye would call June 3rd. There were plenty of flowers, things of the field, yet only a part of those things needed, for the custom called for more of the meats prepared with certain herbs and wines. The day had been fine, the evening was fair, the moon was full. This then brought the activities with the imbibing more and more of wine. So people were drinking more and more of wine. Hilarity. They were probably laughing, having a good time. the dance, which was the form of the circles that were part of the customs, not only of that land then, but that are in your land now, then being revived. With those activities as indicated, the wine ran low. Remember, the sons of Zebedee were among those of the upper class, as would be termed, not the poorer ones. Thus the reason why Mary served or prepared the feast for her relatives. From those happenings, there were a portion of her, Mary's experience upon their return from Egypt, as how the increase had come in the food when they had been turned aside as they journeyed back toward the promised land. Mary felt and knew and was convinced within herself that here again there might be such an experience, with her son returning as the man starting upon his mission. So Jesus was coming to the wedding. For what was the pronouncement to the mother when Gabriel spoke to her? So the angel Gabriel did speak to the mother before she had the child Jesus, telling her of the details. What was the happening with Elizabeth when the mother spoke to her? This might be called the first period of test, for he had not just 10 days ago sent Satan away and received ministry from the angels. So the temptation that Jesus got when he went into the wilderness for 40 days was with Satan, who took him to the mountaintop and said, if you will get down on your knee to me, I will give you all of this. That would be earth, the whole world. And Jesus turned him down and said, no, in my Father's house there are many mansions. He didn't need all this of the world. But apparently Satan was in control of all of this to give to Jesus. Would this be the reptilian beings, the snake in the Garden of Eden? What is the truth? What are we supposed to understand up here? So he sent Satan away after that meeting where Satan tried to tempt him. And then apparently he was ministered by angels. So what are angelic beings? Are they real? Mentions it here, mentions it in the Bible. The channelers that I've been going that long list, they talk about angels. A lot of people don't believe in God anymore. They say, Rick, it's all a myth. They've been programmed not to believe. But they'll believe what these channelers say, that the Palladians are coming to save you, the Galactic Federation. Who knows the truth? I guess all we can do is study a little bit and do and think things that make sense. This killing and murdering of all the Arabs in the Middle East and planning on martial law or some kind of enslavement of the people in the world with microchipping them in FEMA camps and depopulating the planet. That's not the world I want. World War III, nuclear bombs. Destroying the whole system, people running around in rage, looking for food, killing each other, cannibalization, pedophilia, Pizzagate, abducting of people, human sacrifice. Something wrong with this picture. This had come to be known as hearsay. So this thing with Jesus in the going to the mountain with the devil tempting him and being ministered by angels had become known as hearsay. Hence there was the natural questioning of the mother love for the purpose their son, strange in many ways, had chosen. By the dwelling in the wilderness for 40 days, and then his returning to the lowly people, the fishermen, about this country. It brought on the questioning by the mother. So I suppose a lot of people would be talking about a lot of things back then. You think? Exanerus was in the land of promise. Remember, these are readings to people about their part in this history. Before they were reincarnated to when Edgar Cayce had to do their reading. So Exanerus was in the land of promise when the mother walked on the earth. And he was of the priesthood and closely associated with the Zacharias. He announced by the blowing of the ram's horn the various services in the temple, such as the morning, the evening sacrifice, the times when the offerings might be accepted by the priest, and the activities of the sacrificial priest on the altars. So they did animal sacrifices, I guess, hopefully not human, back then as part of their religious ceremonies. And they had this big trumpet they would blow. These things will pop up in future conversations. Hence he knew much about the activities and experiences of John, as well as the procedure in the temple when the child Jesus was presented before the priest, which was required by Jewish law. Thus the entity's whole activities during their sojourn, their travels, related to ritual or to circumstances which were mental and spiritual. While his name was Grecian, he was of the children of Judah, who had taken other names in order to preserve the interests of the Parthians, the Samaritans, and the Essenes. Hence, while he was good repute with the rest of the leaders, he had much knowledge of the mysterious influences pertaining to the reasons for the coming of the wise men, and of their teachings, in addition to the education of John and Jesus to become teachers and leaders. So by mathematical calculations, some kind of prophecy, the wise men showed up at Jesus' birth. How did they know that? And how did John the Baptist get his teachings and was baptizing people before Jesus ever showed up? And John the Baptist said, "He who is coming will be greater than I." Something a little mysterious about all this. Myra, again, these are readings about people, was in the earth when the Master came as a babe. When the Master was born as a baby, Myra was on the earth. And she was in the household of Salome, sister of Mary, mother of the Lord. And she was a babe that viewed the body and played as a child with the Holy Child. So this person born in the 1930s or 40s, getting a reading by Edgar Cayce, was a baby playing with the Jesus baby. And yet she was taken as if by angels themselves. So apparently she died, and died as if angels took her, that she might know the realms of aid which came to those who would counsel in the flesh and in the spirit with our Lord. So the people who interacted with the baby Jesus, I guess, were treated special. This reads as the two sojourners, or incarnations. So the different lives, or the incarnations. The first, when she played, again, this is a reading about a girl. She played with Jesus as a child, then passed on. And second, when she was born again, I guess, she was under the influence of Paul and Titus, and then died the second time at 16. After that, she was in the Roman land when individuals were subject to physical sufferings. This was because they had accepted the tenets and lessons which were being brought to the people, not only by the soldiers, but also by the teachers and ministers. So there was a lot of persecution going on back then, and Christianity was spreading. She came under the influence of Saul of Tarsus, or Paul, through the teaching of Titus, the beloved friend of Paul. All right, page 201. Another person here, Mora. Somebody's names are a little funny. Lived when the Master, Jesus, walked in the earth. She was a member of one of the families of Bethsaida, which provided a home for him to rest. Provided a home for the Master Jesus to rest. Hence, she was well acquainted with him and helped personally to look after the pleasure and comfort of a tired man, the Son of God. Portocalis, another person, was in the time of the Roman activities when the Jews and the laity were being questioned. He was a Roman soldier in the service of Pontius. That would be the leader of Rome. That was the leader over there in Palestine, Jerusalem. Rome's representative leader. And under the supervision of Pilate, during the sojourn of the Son of Man, so during the life of the Son of Man, or Jesus of Nazareth, so-called should be Nazarite, in Galilee, Judea, and thereabouts. I guess the real name is not Nazareth, it's Nazarite, according to this reading. She was in the land when the Master walked, and was well acquainted with the disciples, as well as with his teachings. And she knew the forerunners, John and Zacharias. Hence, the things that pertain to religious thought are very sacred to her. However, in such an environment or surrounding, she tends to be more tolerant with others than with herself regarding duties, obligations, and relationships, through which she may attempt to express her purpose in the spiritual life. So I suppose if we are reincarnated, our previous experiences and teachings would make us, I guess, of some of the character we are today. And by listening to some of these other channeled materials, apparently some of us are young souls and some of us are old souls. And of course the young souls would not have much education and might cause a lot of havoc and disturbances on this earthly plane. While the old souls try to take up positions of leadership and calm the people down and keep everything okay. So quite a little mess we have here with young souls and middle-aged souls and old souls and people following God, people following Satan the devil. But hold fast to that which ye gained in the knowledge that he is your elder brother. This is a reading for somebody. He is in the way, the truth, and the light. He is the law. And if we as individuals walk in that way, there will be no faltering. Condemn not, as he condemned not. So don't condemn people, because Jesus didn't condemn people. For as he taught, so is it ever. As ye do unto the least of my brethren, of thy acquaintances, ye thy enemies, ye do unto him. So apparently we're all spiritual beings and all of God. So when you do harm, I'm just translating here, when you do harm to other people, you're doing harm to God. And he says, don't do that. You were then in close association with the sons of Zebedee and the people about the lake. Therefore, waters that are quiet, waters that are like the ripple in the brook, in the falls, have a great attraction for you at times. Prula lived during the life of the Prince of Peace. So I like how they call Jesus different names. Son of Man, Son of God, Prince of Peace. She was one of the children of the followers of the Master, who were closely associated with his household. For she was a daughter of the sister of Joseph, who was the husband of Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was acquainted with the hardships of that time, the edicts of the Romans. So the Romans were controlling that area and had passed laws, edicts, and of the Jewish leader. And the Jewish leader, King Heron, the one, I forget what his name is. I made a video and spoke a lot about him. But the Jewish king, it'll come to me, was told by the three kings who showed up at Jesus' birth about the coming of the king, the Messiah. And the king back then, what the heck is his name? Issued a law, an edict, that all children under the age of 2, boys, were to be killed to try to prevent this Messiah, this king, from coming. And she knew of the hardships caused by the priest. In the present, people who set themselves up as being an authority are as dirt to her. These she disliked. So this person who was alive now had a personal resentment for authorities, because in this previous lifetime they had treated her and other people badly. So I guess that carried over with her personal feelings in further incarnations. The entity was among those who were students of the law, those who were interested in the activities having to do with questionings pertaining to the law that had been interpreted by the priests and rabbis of the day pertaining to the Mosaic law, and the interesting facts and fancies that had come from the eastern lands from which the wise men had come. These, as part of the teachings, had become adopted by those groups of the Essenes, which were John, Joseph, and Mary had been a part before entering of the Master, Jesus, in the earth. So the Essenes were some offshoot cult that apparently behaved and taught differently than the current Jewish cults. And of course, then you also had the Romans occupying the area, issuing their laws. So apparently there was a lot of conflict back then on those issues and religious activities. Remember, I'm not reading all this, I'm skipping some stuff. So if you want to get the book, please get the book. Give credit where credit is due. I'm going to go over a lot of different books of channeled material and videos I watch to try to get to the bottom of this. What's the truth about our reality? Moving on, page 202 on the bottom. She was the daughter of Zelot, who was a nephew of Nicodemus, the one who went to the Master by night. Thus she was familiar with the rulers during that period, and with the synagogue and its teachings. As a result, it will be easy to find an answering chord when you train her in spiritual things. But tell her the reason why, and remember, train one when it is young, and when it is old, it will not depart from the Lord. So we know they've tried to stop teaching any religious materials in schools. So people not only depart from the Lord, they've never been able to know the Lord. And it's going to create the reality that's coming, apparently. Sumelion, another name, was in Palestine when the Master walked in the earth. And he was one of the scoffers in the Sanhedrin. So that would be the Jewish group or religion, the Sanhedrin. He represented the tribe of Reuben and was of the household of that particular people. And he had represented them in the beginning of the separation of that house, for he had himself been Reuben. Eolise lived when the Master walked in the earth. And although she was only a child, she was among those who joined the pilgrimages to go up on the mountainside to listen to the words of the Master. So Jesus would go up on the mountainsides and talk to the multitudes of people. She was blessed by him on that day when, and he took a little child and sat it in the midst of them, and said, "Lest you become like a little child, ye shall no wise enter in." So I guess he says the rest of us, if we want to wind up in heaven and be spiritual beings, we have to behave like a child, innocent and loving. Just reading what it says. And as she had heard this again and again, there has come a feeling even in her spine that it means me, it means me. Yet she had not held to that, for at other times she has had the feeling instead that it couldn't be me. I am not worthy. It couldn't be me. I don't feel that I am worthy. He that the Lord had blessed shall never lose his hold upon that strength which he might gives to them who seek to know his way. So I guess if you want to seek to know Jesus' way, you can count on some assistance from the Lord. She was a kinsman then of Peter and Andrew, and was close to members of the Andrew's household. Hold fast to the tenets which ye learned in those experiences, for although they caused material hardships, they brought and will bring, even in the experience of each soul, the awareness that he, thy Lord, is in his holy temple, and you may meet him there. All right, moving on. Before that, we find the entity Thaddeus, during that sojourn, that lifetime, of the Prince of Peace in the earth, when men were called into the activity in that land, now known as the Promised Land, or Palestine. So it calls it Palestine. Of course, now we know since World War II, and before, if you've been watching my videos, the last couple hundred years, the Jewish Zionist people have been occupying more and more of Palestine, and now they call it Israel. During those periods when there was the ministry in Galilee, even in the holy city, even unto Tyre and Sidon. Through that experience, the entity gained, though often was among those who were weighing well the material gains to be had, yet gaining throughout their life, the sojourn. For it was among those who came under the sound of the voice and heard, "Believe ye not for my words, for of thy very works' sake believe ye." For the very works' sake believe ye. Patricia lived in Galilee just as the Prince of Peace came into the land. She was one of the Samaritans, which was a people misunderstood by the Jews, by their theological associations, and by the Romans. So now we have a different kinds of people. Samaritans. As a result, she now often finds her disliking some things about the Jews, while at the same time favoring some of their spiritual ideas. Moving on, skipping some material here. So may she, in the present, under the very shadow of doubts and fears, create within the hearts and minds of others who seek to know his way, that hope which springs eternally anew within the human breast. And she will do this by those influences which he, the man of Galilee, brought into the experiences of those gathered about him there. Moving on. For even as he gave, he that is the greatest among you is the servant of all. So as ye have found, and as ye may find in the present, doubt and fear are cast away when the thoughts are lifted to the hope that comes in the cross, even the cross of Jesus. Matthew lived in the period when there were changes in the land of promise. He was called by the Master in the place of the collector of customs, and much has been given to the world about his attempt to explain the position of his people to the Master. He gained in soul development. He gained in his association through his intent and purpose and his desire to set others right. In the present, that which is truth to him is innate, and he desires to give to others in the manner received by himself. So some people want to become natural-born teachers in their reincarnation throughout history. And now. Zebedee lived when the Master walked in the earth. He was drawn to the Master not only through the teachings, but also because of the material persecutions. This was when there were the interpretations of the material laws as controlled by the proliterate, the people who were in charge, the Romans, the Jews, the Parthians, and the Scythians. So you have these different people in charge, powerful leaders, and different peoples trying to enforce their controls or religion on people. All right, moving on. However, when the disciples, the 12 and the 70, were dispersed, many of them came to him for counsel as to ways and means as to whether this was the true prophet or teacher. So even his own disciples, 12 and 70, were seeking validation for the truth. Was Jesus the true prophet and teacher? For Zebedee was the first a follower of John, and then of those who had separated themselves from the Jewish Sanhedrin. So there were people who were separating themselves from the current Jewish religion, the Sanhedrin, and Jewish law back then. He also followed the Essenes. That's another group that separated itself from the Jewish law and teachings, of whom both John the Baptist and the Master came first as teachers and instructors. So these are readings about people. I'm just hoping there's a little bit of meat here so we can get a feeling for the times. He gained in soul development, although he often withheld himself when he might have attained a greater understanding. So even some of the channeled materials talk about soul development. Yet he now has the ability to counsel them who seek knowledge of him, who became the Son of Man, the Son of Mary, who became the Son of God. In this manner he may now render the greatest service and thereby help his fellow man. So a lot of people think it's all a myth. Edgar Cayce's going into a trance doing these readings, contacting apparently the Akashic records, some kind of hall of records. Remember the admonition which the Master gave, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. Thus you may attain joy, happiness, and peace, and understanding, and you may know wherein you have been called. In order to prepare yourself, study to show yourself approved unto that ideal, rightly divining words of truth. For he is the word. He is that which may not be divided, but he may be divided in each word, divined in each word, not divided, that helps you to understand the motivational force of your activities in the earth. So I suppose by studying the Bible, Jesus, believing in him, trying to understand him, can bring some kind of divine force into a person's life. Well, that would make sense if he's divine. Apparently these people who were living back then and later reincarnated had some associated ideas, ideals, and thinking. It says here, meditate often. Separate yourself for a season from the cares of the world. So I guess if you just subtract yourself from the cares of the world, go close to nature and learn from the lowest of that which manifests in nature. Learn from the birds, the trees, the grass, and the flowers, and the bees that the life of each is manifesting, and is the song of glory to its maker. And ye do likewise. Make your heart, your mind, your body one with him. Then, by the laying on of the hands, and by counseling with them who are weak in body and spirit. So I guess if you get into nature and get into God, you can do the laying on of the hands and heal people. Alright, moving on to the bottom of the page here. With respect to Mary and Zebedee, one was descended from the house of Judah, and the other from the lineage of Levi. Therefore, they were closely associated with the priesthood. Yet through Zebedee they had contacts with the Essenes. So this was apparently the cult or group of people that Jesus came from, who were inclined to be a more universal application of the tenets and teachings of that time. In this environment, Naomi was born just after the birth of the Master to Joseph and Mary, who were descended from the household of Judah. She was born between James and John, and during the period when the Master, Jesus, was in Egypt. So apparently Jesus went to Egypt for teaching, part of his education. Their home was outside of Jerusalem, not in Bethany. But Jesus also went to Egypt when he was young. They had to flee for their lives when the king, I don't know why I can't remember that particular king's name. I mentioned it in previous videos. Found out that this Messiah was coming, this king, and so he ordered all the children under 2 years old of that area to be killed. So they had to flee to Egypt, Mary and Joseph and the child. Their home was outside of Jerusalem, near Bethany. As a result of all of this, the influences upon Naomi during the early part of that experience was varied. So remember, these are readings of people who were alive at the time Edgar Cayce gave these readings. He did thousands of them, and the author of this book just went and selected the ones from that period to create a picture of that period for us. Alright, this was owing to the political situations under the Roman rule. Here's the name of that king, Herod. Was I saying it correctly before? Where the edicts were often contrary to those of Herod. So the Jewish king Herod was making his edicts, his laws, and the Roman rulers were making their edicts and their laws. So that could be quite confusing back then. And then there were all these different other groups of people and religious organization, cults if you want to call them that, who ruled over a part of Judea, which later became known as Galilee or Samaria, the residents of which became a questioned people. Remember the situation. Mary, the mother, was of the priesthood that was renounced by the cousin John the Baptist. Also, the activities of the Essenes demanded that the meetings of their members should be kept secret during the conflicting edicts of the Roman ruler and the Jewish ruler Herod. Some confusing times back then. Like now, huh? In addition, she had associates among the Romans, as well as a position in the Jewish faith. So this is a reading about a person, but I like to listen to the kind of side information, the sidebars, where they were, what they were doing. Kind of puts a picture about the period back then. She was educated, and I didn't even know they had all these schools back then. That's kind of fascinating to think about. 2,000 years ago. Jerusalem, Palestine, Rome. She was educated in schools which had teachers from Carmel, yet were connected with the activities of the people about the temple. These latter were dedicated to the service which was to bring that faith to the world today. So this is part of this growth of this Christian religion. In one section were the sisters of the orders known as a Catholic or the Church at present. In another were the Orthodox activities of the Sisters of Mercy among certain Jewish sects. These then were the conditions in which Naomi during her teen years found herself. She was drawn between the holy activities of the Essenes and the dedicating of herself to the faith of her fathers. So she was torn between the Jewish faith of her fathers and the Essenes, which were an offshoot with different rules or different religious teachings. When John the Baptist first began his teaching, she joined with those of the Essene group. For John first taught that women who desired might dedicate their lives to a specific service. Hence, not only the brothers, Peter, Andrew, and John, but also the employees of the brothers joined the Essenes. These employees were the fisher folk who aided in establishing the teachings among the people, and they held to both the old and new faith. I think I'm starting to get worn out from reading. Naomi's complexion was fair, and she had gray eyes and dark hair with a brownish tinge. She was a gentle person and a good cook, a good housekeeper, a wonderful singer, and interested in meditation. Not until after the teachings of the Master, which resulted in the establishing of home altars, did she get married, being then 34 years of age. So they had a home altar, a place to pray at home. She did get married, being then, okay, I read that. It was when the wedding feast was held in Cayce that she met the man who later became her husband. This also brought about a reconciliation between Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and a closer association with Elizabeth, the mother of John. After Naomi's marriage, Elizabeth, who was one of her own kinspeople, came to live with her. This was during the time when the holy women dedicated their lives, bodies, purposes, and aims to the changed teachings between John the Forerunner and the Master Jesus, and the entity gained in soul development during those experiences. And abide in me, and I in thee, and ye in me. Ask, and it shall be given thee. So, believing in Jesus, Abide in me, and I in thee, and ye in me. Ask, and it shall be given. John the beloved, Naomi's brother, may again come and be known among men. That makes you wonder, people who are born today or will be born in the future. Will some of these leaders be reincarnated? What is the truth? Oh, another name here, my holy, was among the lepers, somebody with leprosy, healed by the master at the gate. When the master walked in Galilee, he was among those healed and was the leper at the gate. He gained in soul development, for with the cleansing came the desire to manifest that which he had found. He has the ability now to express well all of his knowledge and to draw on his inner thoughts in both a spiritual and physical manner, which is exemplified in a physical way. To explain the statement, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Apparently it has an interesting meaning. The individuals who heard the things presented by the Master eventually would be in the earth when the prophecies described would be fulfilled. So when he said that, he didn't mean that those people, when that generation passed, apparently, according to what I'm interpreting, what it's saying here, when they reincarnated, that those people will still be on the earth, their souls, and they will be here when the to all these things come. When the prophecies described would be fulfilled. Prophecies described. It did not mean that the incarnation, that incarnation at that time, that they would return again at some time mentioned. It didn't mean that they would be the prophecies fulfilled back then. I have to try to understand and say this clearly. But that they would return again, and at that time mentioned the prophecies would be fulfilled. So how many times have we all lived? How many people are young souls and only lived, this is their first time? And how would they behave? People 4 or 5 lifetimes, 6 or 7. To explain the Master's statement to Nicodemus, ye must be born again. Nicodemus was one of the teachers and elders of the Sanhedrin, and he had access to all the information given from the time Moses received on the mount, the ordinances and the relationships of individuals to individuals, and of the individual's soul to its maker. So they had laws about how you're supposed to behave with relation to God, and they got laws how you're supposed to behave with each other. Much, however, had become like hearsay and omens rather than ordinances of old. So the religion teachings were ancient, and a lot of people were just treating them as hearsay. And when Nicodemus asked, how can such things be? The rebuke came in his answer. Art thou a teacher in Israel, and knoweth not these things? Ye must be born of water, of blood, or of spirit, and through the flesh. Or all must pass under the rod, even as Moses and the children of Israel passed through the sea. And they were baptized in the cloud and in the sea. This was an example or omen. It was a physical sign of spiritual and physical separation from their sojourn in Egypt, their travels in Egypt. As the Master gave to Nicodemus, you must be born of the Spirit, where you may make manifest the fruits of the Spirit. So I guess one thing is to start with, people need to believe we have a spirit. That's a start. Believe there is a God. And of course, Jesus said, whoever believes in him and what happened back then shall be saved. So that seems to me good sense for me. And people will choose what they want to. I'm just trying to figure out what the heck is going on planet Earth. What's it all about? Why do they plan on depopulating the planet? Martial law, World War III, plagues, weather control, HARP systems, mind control, TV programming right now that's insane. All these other things we see in the news. Even today, they're accusing President Donald Trump of being a traitor. He's been a president a couple months. See, he's given the Russians secrets. So the people who are the opposition party, the Democrats, the liberals, the globalists, they're going to be relentless. Is President Donald Trump a part of it? It seems likely. But it's the Hegelian dialectic, the two parties fighting against each other for our entertainment and mind control. Sorry about that. Phone ringeth. So remember, when I'm reading from Edgar Cayce, this book, and other materials, it's just a presentation of what this information says about the channeling material, whether it's from the Akashic Records or some kind of other entity. So when I read the other material from other channeled mediums, psychics, and watch some of the videos and take some notes, we can compare. Let's try to see what the philosophy is. And it seems to me, I can tell you what it is. It seems to be very much, a lot of it, coming right out of the Theosophist Society or the Kabbalah. Which is not, to me, a good thing. That's my opinion. But if I see something good in it, we'll talk about that. But I'm just trying to figure it out right now. So moving on with the book here. As the Master gave to Nicodemus, you must be born of the Spirit, where you may make manifest the fruits of the Spirit. This would be in the earth. These births would not necessarily come in order indicated in the questioning by Nicodemus, but the relative position would be according to the development, the necessity, the need for soul growth, and for soul understanding. The soul is the body, and the physical is a mere temple or shell, or material manifestation of that which may not be touched by the hands. So I've always been saying in my videos, this is biological being, this body is just a temple for the soul. The soul is the real body. Nobody gets off of earth alive. We all return to something. Reincarnation? I don't know. According to my research, it seems likely. And all these materials, it's clearly evident from my research that there are benevolent entities and malevolent entities. There are good entities and bad entities. And how bad is bad? How evil is evil? I guess the only way to kind of figure it out is to ponder it, to read some material, think about it, talk about it, pray about it, meditate. For it appears that we must be born again, so that we may dwell in these mansions, not made with hands, but prepared for those who have washed their robes, their bodies, their souls in the blood. For you may know the truth, if you will be manifest in your experiences, that which you have learned in your meditations with your God. You must be born in flesh and in spirit again, so that you may manifest that which you have experienced in the soul. Page 212, moving on. Another name here, another reading. Idly was in the country of the Gardanians when the Prince of Peace entered there, and she was a messenger for the master, being in close contact to the one who received the influence of the Prince of Peace. Another reading by a person. Zaul lived when the Master came into the land of Galilee. He was one of the fishermen who heard and saw much of the teachings and ministering by the Master. And while he did not wholly accept the teachings, he never rejected them. Down on the bottom of this page, she gained mentally and spiritually in that incarnation. She wandered from place to place, for she became a singer and a dancer to pay for her expenses. Like I said, I'm reading some of this stuff about back then, what they did to pay the bills, singing and dancing. That sounds like today. For that she might hear more of the messages and teachings of this man who had taught at the well. So she was a singer and a dancer, and she wanted to hear what Jesus was saying and teaching. All right, next page, 214. I'm only reading portions of this stuff. Get the book. Give credit where credit is due. Jeffrey Frost on the bottom there. Readings by Edgar Cayce. Story of Jesus. America's Sleeping Prophet offers his unique interpretation of the greatest story ever told. And remember when I did the book of Ra recently, the Ra material, not the book of Ra, and somebody questioned Ra, and he said Edgar Cayce wasn't channeling an entity, he was actually accessing the Akashic records, the Hall of Records. All right, another reading here. In the later portion of her sojourn, her lifetime, when the persecutions began in Jerusalem. I've talked a lot about the Jews in Jerusalem. So this 2,000 years ago, persecutions began then, were going on. She journeyed to the land of her birth in Galilee. There she became associated with Andrew, Bartholomew, Jude, and others who became ministers. And she helped to pass on what she had learned to people who were in despair in the body and mind and troubled in spirit. So, I think the people who are controlling our reality right now are creating a situation where there is despair in the body, genetically modified foods and all kinds of other toxins, in the mind, the teachings, the dumbing down of America and the world, the lies, the deception, the news, the TV, and troubled in spirit and disconnecting everybody from God. This is my thinking. They are really messing with us, to put it in plain English. So what is the truth? As a result, she had the ability to be a nurse, to tend to the sick, and to help individuals in trouble. These abilities are innate in the present. Next paragraph. Jesus at the wedding of Cana caused the wine to be blush. Water saw its master. So Jesus could turn the water into wine. Blushed and became wine even by activity. Remember, only when it was poured out would it become wine. So in the jug, it was still water. It only turned to wine as it was pouring out. So the water had met its master. Had it remained still, no wine would have filled those conditions where embarrassment was being brought even to the friend. On the bottom here, Andrew followed closely throughout the whole physical career of the Master, not as one of the chosen three, yet one who was given often the greater physical condition, task, things to do, and carry out. One often spoke to for the references to the others, for this is particularly seen in the feeding of the multitudes. So there were more than just the disciples assisting Jesus in his ministries. At that time, Ardoni, sounds like another person here, as the son of Andrew, brought to his father the companion, the lad with the loaves and the few fishes, that there might be supplied from what was on hand sufficient for the material needs to feed the multitude. So I get about almost 2 hours into a video, my throat starts to get sore. But once I get rolling, I have to kind of finish and get in that groove. You want to just finish it. All right, moving on. The mother of Peter's wife, Eldria, was once healed of a terrible fever by the Master himself. This brought about great changes in Nicodemus and his wife Martha, the younger sister of Esdrelda. So by the miracles accomplished by Jesus, apparently changed a lot of people back then, even of the Jewish leadership or the Roman leadership and other people. So that's why the stories have endured so long and why we have the Christian religion. Page 216, I highlighted some material here in the middle of the bottom page. For soon after the return, that return recorded in the Holy Writ, the Bible, from the journey to the city for the period of the Passover, we find that James, the elder brother of the entity Ruth, was born into that experience. In the next year, after there had been the beginnings of the teachings of Jesus by the wise men of the East, and his sojourn to Persia, Iran, and India. So apparently Jesus had traveled and was taught in India, in Persia, in Egypt, and other places. Interesting to know. I do have a book about that. I just found it yesterday. I've acquired a lot of books over the years. The 18 absent years of Jesus. The mystery of those absent years as interpreted by Lloyd Kenyon Jones. So I like reading the Edgar Cayce material because it kind of tells a similar story. When was this published? It doesn't say the date. 1943? Got some pictures in here. Wow, crazy pictures. I think it's been quite a while since I've looked at this book. The town of Nazareth. That's what the town looked like back then. A little bit different today, you think? The Christ boy learns the carpenter trade. So I guess they were teaching Jesus the child the carpenter trade. The Madonna, Jesus, and John the Baptist. Jesus, Christ, and the fishermen. There's Jesus talking to the fishermen. Telling them about how they should behave, about God, how they should treat their fellow men. Alright, back to the book. Try to finish this video. So apparently Jesus traveled to Persia, India, and when these activities brought about the change in the material or financial status of the family, Ruth was born in the city of Corpina, and she was surrounded by such activities that benefited the peoples of that period that day. I'm not reading everything, just my highlighted portions. There's a lot here I wanted to share, so I suppose I'll have to make another video. Alright, so as the entity grew into maidenhood, so this is another reading about a lady who was alive. And after the birth of Jude, then the death of Joseph brought that brother Jesus home. So after Jesus' father, the human father, who wasn't really part of his birth, but the husband of Mary, when he died, Jesus came home from Egypt. The three were those, and there were those activities which surrounded the entity Ruth, Edgar Cayce doing a reading for somebody, concerning that unknown, that strange kinsman, that kinsman whom the people held in awe, yet about whom some said many unkind things. So they were saying unkind things about Jesus because of his teachings, which were not in line with the current Pharisees or Jewish religion. With the departure of his brother to Egypt, and for the final initiations or teachings with John, another kinsman who had been spoken of and held in awe, since his John's mother had been a chosen vessel by the priest of the Essenes. And since he, John, was the lineal descendant of the high priest of the Jews. Here we find the entity was divided in thought. So somebody that Edgar Cayce is doing a reading for. An activity between the tenets held by the elder brother, James, those held by the mother, and the actual activities of the entity as one among a people who were being questioned and doubted. Then with the return of John, the cousin, in the beginning of his ministry, one who had renounced his position as a priest, who might serve in the temple in order to become an outcast and a teacher in the wilderness, there was brought consternation to the entity Ruth. So this particular entity Ruth was kind of disturbed because of the John, her relative, who turned down the Jewish priesthood and became a minister in the woods, later becoming John the Baptist. And he was the forerunner coming before Jesus came. As John the Baptist had said, "He that comes after me will be greater." And again, there was a questioning of the mother as to those experiences of the mother preceding the birth of that brother Jesus. So even Jesus' mother, I'm sure, had questions, and the family about his preaching. Then came the return of Jesus to the Palestine land. After those periods of test in the wilderness, after his meeting with John, and then the return to Carpathian, and the teachings which he, Jesus, accorded there. The entity Ruth then, for the first time, heard his first utterances in the synagogue as to the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and the teachings of the lesser prophets. So this stuff's in the Bible. And as to how they applied to the experiences of that day. So how does all this apply to the experiences we're in today? It does appear that prophecies are being fulfilled. And people have a decision to make, a side to pick. Is it going to be the New Age and rainbow agenda, or is it going to be God, Jesus, whatever religious teachings people have? So that's why I'm concerned about the channeled material. Is somebody trying to deceive everybody, which seems likely, because it's becoming so popular, and all the stuff that's the truth they're trying to suppress, the family values, Christianity type of stuff. So whatever becomes popular is obviously being accepted and promoted, created. And I've got books on this stuff. It's more horrific, and I'll be making a video on that really soon. It's all been planned during the whole 1900s, World War I, World War II, the infiltration of the education system in the world, and medical and church system, religious organizations, TV, radio, billboards, magazines. It's all a big mind control operation. Some evil forces are at play. It seems to be, without a doubt, if you want to look and see it. And there was one video website that I was just looking at that tells this stuff to some 10th millionth degree. I'm looking at my computer. If you have any doubts at all, the music industry, the educational, schools, go to Gnostic Media, GNOSTIC, MEDIA, .com, I guess. Why doesn't it say that there? GnosticMedia.com, GNOSTIC. This guy has put together huge graphs connecting everybody. H.G. Wells. Throughout history, the last 100 or so years, Black Ops programs, they have intentionally created the Grateful Dead. Think about that, the band, the Grateful Dead. It's got something. When you click this one link called the brain, GnosticMedia.com. Anyway, you click this thing called a brain. There's this vast chart, all these actual documents involving the CIA, Freemasonic organizations, Council of Foreign Relations, a lot of government money, organizations. I printed some of this out. It says here, different ways to do research, Occam's razor, simplest answers, usually the truth, the War of the Worlds, remember that movie? All this stuff that's meant to mind control us. Ernest Hemingway's The War of the Worlds, And so much on this website. The FBI's Secret Wars, GnosticMedia.com. It's all planned. And when I'm reading this channeled material about God, about what was going on back then, the importance of family at this Gnostic media. They're trying to destroy family and family values because they know together we're united. Satan's Sabbatan Jews. That's what it says here. Satan's Sabbatan Jews. You got to go look at this website. Transhumanism. Music and mind control. Transhumanism again. Bureaucracy and authoritarianism. We all know that the laws are increasing. Your brain on porn. GnosticMedia.com. And when you see these guys, they got a lot of videos up there. So I don't care how people get there, watching my videos or looking at some other people's material. But I think it's important to get there. See what the truth is. Back to the book here, trying to finish this. Returning from this meeting, where a torment was raised, owing to the utterances of that new teacher, the entity encountered the entity Pleilos, a collector, not in the sense of a taker in, but the supervisor, overseer, examiner, as to the activities of various individuals in various positions to pay that tribute. So we call it a tax collector. A Roman. So this entity met this Roman tax collector. Because of her beauty, their mutual interest in helping the less fortunate, and the natural consequences of their ages, there was brought about a bond of sympathy between the two. So I guess this one follower of Jesus met this Roman tax collector, and I guess they were falling in love. Thus Phalos, the Roman, came in close contact with those of the household from which the master had gone, Jesus, becoming associated with and later married to, and by the master, the sister of the master, the only sister who had received education in Greece, Rome, and because of the family's association with the sects, different cults, and the Jews, and a portion that favored the Romans. So apparently there was a fairly decent relationship between different Jewish sects and the Romans. In that later portion of the entity's Ruth's travels, sojourn life, while children were born in Rome, during those activities of the entity, the companion Philos, the Roman tax collector, much aid was brought into those in the Roman experience who accepted the new teachings, Jesus' teachings. Much that gave help and strength to bear the persecutions later. So there were persecutions back then. There's no wonder like around 300 something, 400 years, 300 years after Jesus' death, did Rome and the leadership there accept Christianity as its world religion. The Catholic means universal. So the persecutions were there later, was established in the hearts and the minds and the experiences of those peoples during the entity's sojourners' travels. Question: with the beginning of Jesus' ministry come the healings and miracles. What would you tell us of these? As to the healings, the miracles performed by the Master, the first record begins with the miracle in Capernaum, or Cana, nigh unto Capernaum, when he had recently returned from the wilderness, when the water was turned into wine. It was one of the few instances where miracles were performed among his own people, among his own kindred. Did the Master come to be about his work or his Father's work? So was Jesus doing what he wanted to do or what God wanted him to do? As individuals, as representatives of the Master, as heirs with him, did we go about our Father's work or what we choose as our work? There is a difference. Respecting the miracles of healing, there were many instances where individual healings were of such nature as to be instantaneous. As that one when he said to him sick of palsy, "Son, thy sins be forgiven thee." When the question came, as he knew they would, he answered, "Which is easier to say? Thy sins be forgiven thee, or take up thy bed and go into thine house?" Immediately the man arose, took up his bed, and went into the house. Here we find that the healing, was not the command he issued, but by his own personages, for the question was not as to whether he healed, but as to whether he had the power to forgive sins. It was recognized that sin had caused the physical disturbance. So think about that, and I'll finish this video. They're promoting all this evil thinking. People on the streets have even demons tattooed on their bodies and daggers and blood, even with the drops. Dragons, snakes, unbelievable. And then the horrific TV programming, blood and gore and death and mayhem. And the destruction of religion. And if thinking wrong causes illness, mentally, physically, whatever, spiritually, and the people, obviously, looking at GnosticMedia.com, even through the music and even children's cartoons, if you watch them, and apparently if you play them backwards, it's just pure evil magic. So if they're doing that to our minds, it has to affect our bodies, causing illness, depression, suicide. The evil is at work. That's me thinking aloud here. And we the people need to wake up and be aware of it. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Rick Miracle reporting. Thank you for watching my video.